Hello, everyone. It's the Skull Session Recruiting Podcast, National Signing Day Recruiting Capsules, BuckeyeHuddle.com. I am Marc Givler. We've got Kevin Noon here. Great receiver class. We got another receiver here to talk about, Brandon Inniss, 5-star prospect, a powerhouse, South Florida powerhouse, American heritage, signed with the Buckeyes. There was some talk of maybe a February delay. That did not come to fruition. Brandon Inniss is in the class. Kevin, how excited should Ohio State fans be about Brandon Inniss?
On a scale of 1 to 10, 14. I mean, Brandon Inniss is incredible. And as we talk about through these capsules, we talk about every Ohio State receiver, and it's like, Kevin, which one's your favorite? And I guess it depends on which capsule I'm in, and because each one of them is my favorite, because this whole class is pretty fantastic. But Inniss, 6 foot, buck 90. We've had the opportunity to go down to American Heritage and see him during practice. You've had the opportunity to go down and see him play. Um, he is an alpha dog. He is an alpha dog out there. He's somebody who, more than a few times during his collegiate career is going to say, get on my back. I'm going to carry us to the finish line. Not everybody's like that. I mean, it's just one of those situations. There could be guys that could be more talented, and I'm not saying that that's the case, that there are, but there's a lot of other factors out there. But the true alpha dogs, those are the guys that you want to have, and that's what Inniss is.
Yeah, he is definitely an high energy, the type of guy you think probably would be a good future captain. Um, just unbelievable leadership, intensity. I think, again, here he is taking a little bubble screen, tunnel screen all the way. This is a game I was at against Chaminade Madonna. It was just a huge play at that point in the game. Chaminade Madonna ends up winning on a late Jeremiah Smith touchdown, but just a force in terms of just a presence about him, an energy about him that is infectious. And I think you nailed it on that. That's maybe my favorite thing about him. Um, again, Ohio State cross trains their receivers, so I'm not trying to like pigeonhole guys into certain spots because they will learn all the spots. They'll move around. But this class has a bunch of guys who can play in the slot, but have kind of those outside receiver bodies. Brandon Inniss, to me, is a guy who's going to play in the slot. He's a guy who can play. He's kind of the reverse of that. He's a guy who, as far as being a slot body who can play on the outside. So he's kind of a 180 from some of these other guys, which I think will get him on the field very early. I think he's very college ready. He has been under the spotlight since his freshman year. He's played a ton of varsity football in Florida. He's been on, the South Florida Express team, and those guys have been talking Brandon Inniss up since his freshman year. So this has kind of been, a guy who has been on the recruiting radar and just under the microscope for years. And so I think he's going to hit the ground running. So for me, Kevin, I think he's maybe the quickest to get on the field just because of the energy he brings and his ability as a college ready slot guy.
Well, and the good news for all four of the receivers in this class is the fact that none of the four receivers from last year's class necessarily had an opportunity to get out there and kind of secure one of the roles for next year. So you're going to have 8 receivers that will have very limited or to zero collegiate experience, all vying for these spots. And Brandon Inniss is somebody who plays in one of the best classifications, or the best classification of one of the best high school football states out there. He's been playing against the Chaminade Madonnas and the Miami Centrals and some of these schools for years and years, and then playing at South Florida Express is heaven on. And we can have a debate how much real football that is, but it's something that is well suited toward a player like Brandon Inniss. I mean, he's not going to come into a situation and be like, oh my God, this is so foreign to me. I don't know what I'm out of my depth. I'm over my skis. That's never going to be a problem with Brandon Inniss. And he is somebody that could certainly be one of those guys that could have a role to maybe take some of the pressure off of a Marvin Harrison Jr. as Ohio State kind of looks to reshuffle the deck and see what things look like. Obviously, they didn't have JSN this year, so his departure isn't necessarily going to change the equation all that much. But we've seen instances where Marvin Harrison Jr. gets bracketed because nobody else is necessarily able to give him enough help on the other side. I think Brandon Inniss, especially coming out of the slot, is going to be somebody who will be able to do that quickly.
Yeah, I mean, this is just again, this is a guy who I think, as we've talked about, I think physically he's an incredibly strong, powerfully built kid. He's played. It has to be 50, 60 varsity games in his high school career at this point, against some of the nation's best players, best teams. Um, I think this is the guy who will have the least amount of culture shock when he gets to Columbus, and everyone's gonna go through it, even Innis. But I think of all the guys here that they're bringing in, and I think maybe across all positions in this entire class, I think he's the guy who may have the least amount of culture shock. I think he's going to be pretty much ready to plug and play and get some snaps. I kind of have little, I don't know, superlatives or whatever you want to call them for all these receivers. I've got to, you can watch the other capsules and kind of see what I have to say about each one, but there's like a thing for like each one of these guys in the class, most versatile, this, that, or the other. And with Innis, I think he's the safest bet in this class. I think there are maybe one or two guys in this receiver class that maybe have a little more physical upside, long-term potential. But if you tell me, three of these four receivers they sign are going to wash out. Who's the guy who's not going to wash out? It's Brandon Inniss. I think he's the guy who's the safest. I think there's very, very low percentage chance that he's not a productive player at Ohio State, and that may sound almost like a knock. It's not. It's actually incredibly important. You want the high floor guys. You don't want the guys who, you don't necessarily always want the boomer bust guys. You want the guys, you want a guy in the class who is going to be, even if he's not a top 10 pick, he's going to be a really good productive player for you. I think that's Innis in this class.
I felt that way about Garrett Wilson coming out of high school. I felt that he was really safe, and lo and behold,
Yeah.
where did he get picked?
Yeah. And you don't want to get me on a Garrett Wilson tangent because that's been one of my favorite guys to cover over the years. But yeah, I mean, it's one of those that you watch Brandon Inniss over the course of the last 3 years, and you're like, boy, it's really hard to see a scenario where he doesn't pan out. It'd almost have to be an injury or something that would have to happen. It's just very hard to see a scenario where he doesn't pan out. Looking back at his process was a little interesting. Committed to Oklahoma initially. And it's funny, I sort of 180'd on this one during the process. I initially was very like, oh, I really don't think they're going to get him. And then he does commit to Oklahoma. And then as soon as he decommitted from Oklahoma, Lincoln Riley takes the USC job. And, I think there was a natural instinct like, oh, he's just going to follow Lincoln Riley to USC. But it very, very quickly, you kind of learned if you're following this one, like, I don't think he's going to do that. That's a little bit too far from home. And I kind of want to, I'm like, man, I think they're going to get him now. And sure enough, after, a few months of courtship there, they were able to get him signed as he was the middle guy, right? They had back to back there in June. It was Carnell Tate, Brandon Inniss was 2, and then Noah Rogers. So Inniss was the second guy in that kind of legendary 3-day run. We've talked about Hartline's got these different angles he's had to take. Every receiver's been an impressive recruiting job in this class, but all of them for kind of different reasons. The stick-to-itiveness here, I guess, for Inniss.
Absolutely. I mean, he just never gave up. I mean, honestly, I'd forgotten about the Oklahoma commitment. I mean, that's ancient history. That must be written in Sanskrit or something, or hieroglyphics, because that feels like a long time ago. But Brian Hartline, he's kind of like Chuck Norris. He doesn't sleep, he waits. And he just waited, and the opportunity was there. Keenan Bailey does such a great job in South Florida too, and they were there. And the thing is that Brian Hartline is such a player's coach. He still can go out there. Looks like he can run routes. He just connects so well with these guys. But I think the thing with a Brandon is too is to just look at the track record and say, look at the guys that we're putting in the league. Look at what's going on. Look at the dollar figures of these contracts and everything else. I already kind of talked about Garrett Wilson. You throw Chris Olave. I mean, I'm not even necessarily even getting into the Mike Thomases of the world, who's unfortunately been pretty banged up for the last couple years. But yeah, just what Brian Hartline has been able to do, and just kind of hang around and just ultimately select players. It's silly. It's ridiculous. And now Ohio State is just so firmly entrenched in terms of landing South Florida Express kids, and that carries on into 2024. And yeah, we still have to see Jeremiah Smith sign, but that's we got plenty of time to talk about that one. But what Ohio State's been able to do within that program, and pulling these guys not only away from the big three in the state of Florida, but the UGAs and the Alabamas of the world too. I mean, it's just give them the keys to the city. I mean, because it's impressive.
And the pipeline at American Heritage isn't slowing down as far as talent. They've got a freshman, Malachi Tony, who's a special kind of receiver. Big time player. Made a lot of huge plays for them this year as a freshman, and it's a program you really don't get on the field much. So he's a rare talent, and Brandon Inniss is kind of a big brother figure there. So that could be interesting. Malachi already has offers from Ohio State and Alabama, so this is going to be fun. And he's a big personality. We've talked about, some of these guys are low key, some of these guys aren't. Malachi is he's a big personality, Florida speed receiver, and so that one's going to be fun the next couple of years. We'll see if Brandon's can have an impact there. You hinted at it quickly. That was another good observation. Keenan Bailey, obviously now going to be the tight ends coach, but Broward County guy. American Heritage is in Broward County. Keenan Bailey's presence certainly did not hurt. He deserves a primary assist there to Brian Hartline's goal on this one. So another great recruiting job here at receiver by Ohio State. And I think I'm usually pump the brakes guy on, expectations on true freshmen. And I'm not expecting Brandon Inniss to start next year by any means, but I think Brandon Inniss is a guy who can get on the field as a freshman. I think he's going to be probably the most college ready of this group. So we will see what happens. He'll be on campus soon enough. We will be on to our next capsule here, but again, these will all be on BuckeyeHuddle.com. You can read and watch the videos, or you can get it on YouTube at youtube.com/BuckeyeHuddle, or you can download on your podcast platform of choice. But we will see you on the next one.